I've cheated on my husband over 20 times and I don't bother hiding it because I secretly hate him. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's not me on Instagram. My husband is the biggest vagina in the world. Here's a little backstory. He and I met 5 years ago, and as soon as we met, I was the one that was interested in him. Which drives me crazy now, the fact that I chased this man. Disgusting. All I did was ask him out on a date and he said yes. After that, he fell in love with me and I did too. Within the first couple of months of our relationship, I realized that he was extremely sensitive. This man would cry a lot, and his feelings would get hurt very easily. So I basically had to start walking on eggshells to make sure I wouldn't offend him. For example, I once did my own laundry and I didn't do his. Number one, he was really upset, and number two, he started crying because he said that I didn't love him enough. His mood swings were all over the place. And then the worst part, he got fired from his job and basically didn't bother looking for another one. He told me that he wanted to live off of his savings for the next couple of years. This man never wanted to pay for anything. If we went out to dinner with his friends, he would never offer to pay for my dinner. His friends would pay for my dinner. I was so beyond embarrassed. I was footing the bill for everything. He barely paid me rent. Part 2 is up. I've cheated on my husband over 20 times and I don't bother hiding it because I secretly hate him. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's not me on Instagram. So aside from him not ever paying for anything and fully expecting me to pay for things, I began to hate him. You might ask me why I married him. He comes from a really rich family, so I thought he would eventually ask his parents for money. But no, he did not. Before I knew it, 3 years had passed. And like I said, he is such a big vagina. He always cries about everything. He was always in a bad mood. He was always getting sick. It got to the point where I couldn't even be around him because every time I was, all he would do was complain about what he was feeling that day. He always had a headache or his back hurt. And so he would ask me to do things for him. I was constantly having to give him massages, was always going to buy him medicine. This man would wake me up at 3 in the morning and go ask me to buy stuff. I was literally taking care of my child. Oh, and let's talk about our sex life. It was boring. He always did the exact same thing, never wanted to try anything new, and basically always complained about having to do things to me because it pained him. So I was completely unsatisfied, like all the time. I began hating him more and more every day. Even the sound of his voice triggers me. You might ask me, do I love him? I do. I care about him, but I'm not in love with him. Part 3 is up. I've cheated on my husband over 20 times and I don't bother hiding it because I secretly hate him. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's not me on Instagram. After realizing that I was living with the man-child who made me do everything for him, who cried all the time, who was always so sensitive and always needed something, and complained 24/7, I decided to start cheating. A few years ago, I had met a guy through a coworker. We always followed each other on Instagram and I knew that he was attracted to me. And he's pretty hot. And rich and good looking. So I decided to reach out on Instagram and asked him if he wanted to go out. Not only did he say yes, he planned a whole outing. We went hiking and we went to get massages. Then he took me out to dinner. And then we went to his place and had amazing sex. I would see this guy about 3 times a week. Then I started hooking up with another guy that I met at the gym. This guy was really hot, but he didn't have a lot of money, so we never really went out. It was just plain sex, but it was good. About 6 months later, I met another guy. Again, amazing sex. Do you think my husband noticed anything? No. I would talk to these guys on the phone while my husband was in the same room. I would be setting up dates with these guys in the same room as my husband. Do you think he cared? No. I would even wear sexy outfits to go out with them and he never asked anything. He would just say, have fun, and then he would call me to complain about what he was feeling and what he wanted me to buy. Am I terrible for doing this? Story time of how I found out my boyfriend was cheating on me with my cousin. My boyfriend and I had been together for 2.5 years. His family loved me and my family loved him and they expected us to get married. Well, last year when COVID started, we were actually in different countries, so we didn't see each other for 3 months. During those 3 months, we FaceTimed 4 times a day. And we were always texting. He happened to be quarantining in our hometown, so both of our families were in the same place. I was quarantined in a different country. One day my cousin calls me and tells me that she met a really nice guy on a dating website. I was so happy for her because she had had bad luck with guys. Every single week, her and I would catch up on the phone and she would tell me how much she liked this guy and how amazing their dates were and how amazing he was in bed, how sweet and considerate he was. I couldn't be happier for her. Well, when I finally get back home, my boyfriend is super distant and cold. So naturally, I called my cousin and complained. She told me to give him space. She said I should just leave him alone. And so like an idiot, I did leave him alone. One day my cousin calls me and tells me to come over for dinner. When I got there, my boyfriend's car was parked in her garage. I thought it was just her nice way of trying to get us to talk. I walk in and catch them doing the dirty on the couch. Come back for part 2. So I walk in on my cousin and my boyfriend doing the dirty on her couch. They quickly get up from the couch and get dressed. Of course, by that time, I'm in hysterics. I'm crying and yelling. My boyfriend instantly got on his knees and begged me for forgiveness. I went up to my cousin and I punched her right in the face. She wasn't expecting that. And I said, well, this is the guy that you've been dating, isn't it? She said yes, and that she was just trying to find the best way to tell me. And so she just thought the best way to tell me was to get me to walk in on her and him doing the dirty. I punched her again. My boyfriend came to her rescue, though. Instantly went into hero mode, which made me even angrier, so I punched him too. I stormed out of her house and went back to my house. Well, I told my parents everything. And my dad went over to my uncle's house, my cousin's dad, and he told him everything. She was about to turn 19, so he took away her phone and her car. And I get a phone call from my ex, come back for part 3. 3. So my lying, cheating ex calls me and explains to me why he actually slept with my cousin. He said that he was so lonely and that he didn't know what to do, and that the closest thing to me he could find was my cousin. Right, as if that was any comfort to me. He said I should be grateful that I didn't cheat with someone else. I told him he had totally betrayed my trust and that I could never ever trust him again. And then he confessed that she was pregnant and that his parents wanted them to get married. He said he just wanted to give me a heads up. Then he said that we could still be together but just not tell anyone, so basically he wanted me to be his side piece. I couldn't believe the words that were coming out of his mouth. It was like I didn't know this man. Guess what I did? I recorded the entire conversation. So I went straight to my cousin and I let her listen to it. She was so shocked. She couldn't believe that he would offer to have me as a side chick. Well, I also let my uncle listen to it. He went to my ex's house and beat him up. Honestly, that made me sad, but he deserved it. They now have a baby and he's gained 50 pounds. Trust your instincts, girl, and always record your conversations. Also, how cute are my nails? Here's a little story time of what my crazy celebrity ex-boyfriend would get mad at if I did or did not do. He would get mad if I would, for example, go to the DMV and put lip gloss on to take a picture. He said that I was trying to get attention from other guys, and the fact that he wasn't going with me proved that I was trying to get attention from other guys, therefore pickup guys at the DMV. He would also get mad if I showed him too much affection or if I tried to kiss him, because he said that that meant that I was a nymphomaniac and that the only conclusion he could come to was that I was cheating on him because I was a nymphomaniac. So eventually I stopped being affectionate altogether, and that made him think that I didn't want him because I was never affectionate. So I told him one day, well, if I am affectionate, it's bad, but if I'm not affectionate, it's bad. And he said, you're right, so you're stuck. He would also, for some reason, think that I was Lil Wayne's side chick, so anytime a Lil Wayne song came on, I had to. Part 2 of what my celebrity ex-boyfriend would get mad at if I did or didn't do. He would get mad if I answered the phone too quick because that meant that I was hiding something and I didn't want him to be suspicious, but it also made him mad if I didn't answer the phone quick enough because that meant that I was definitely doing something bad. He would also get mad if I offered to go over to his place instead of mine because that meant I was hiding guys in my apartment, in my bathroom and in my closet. So he would randomly show up to my apartment, check underneath my bed, my closets, and my bathrooms. And when he saw that there was no one there, he would storm out and say, I'm going to catch you one day. He would also get upset if my manager or my agent called me telling me that I had an audition because it made him envious, although he would say that what they were trying to do was actually pimp me out. He would get so envious and jealous if I had booked a commercial, if I was working on set, or if I had anything going for me in my life other than him. My husband just confessed to me that he settled for me. Disclaimer, is not my story time, send me an Instagram. Ugh. My husband and I met when we were in college. My best friend at the time, let's call her Tori. Her and I lived together and were best friends. We did everything together. I mean, we were like sisters. Let's call my husband Jack. Jack came to school and he was a newbie. He had 0 friends, so Tori and I decided to take him in. So the 3 of us went on to become the 3 Musketeers. He would stay over our apartment so much that we actually just asked him to move in. We would cook for each other, help each other study. We would even do each other's laundry whenever somebody needed help. I'm telling you, we were all like a tight-knit family. But I have a confession. As soon as Jack moved in, I started falling in love with him. But at the time, I never had the balls to ever tell him. You see, Tori was considered the prettier of the 2 of us. And I never resented Tori for that, but people made it very clear that she was the prettier one. And she was always the one to get hit on, never me. But one night, we all got drunk and Jack ended up kissing me. He actually even tried to hook up with me, but I said no. Part 2 is up. My husband confessed that he settled for me. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, I sent him on Instagram. That night, he tried to hook up with me, but I said no. Following morning, he actually apologized. At the time, Tori had just started dating another guy. I mean, Tori had a new boyfriend every single week. At the time, I wished I could have 1 boyfriend. While she had 10, I had 0. This is when I started noticing that Jack was a little jealous of Tori's new relationship. Anytime her new boyfriend would come over, he would get in a really bad mood. I asked him if he was jealous and he said no. A few days later, we all got drunk again and Jack kissed me again. Eventually, we ended up dating and he asked me to be his girlfriend and then we got married. And that all happened within a year. Tori at this time had already gotten married to the guy that she was dating. We actually both had our weddings around the same time. At the time, I felt so lucky that I was able to marry the man that I had fallen in love with in college. I was actually afraid that I would end up alone because I wasn't as pretty as Tori. Fast forward to a year after we all got married. We actually all ended up living in the same cities as well. Tori invited us over for dinner to see their new house. During the dinner, my husband decided to have a few too many drinks. And that's when he blurted out, I actually liked Tori before I liked you. I only married you because Tori got engaged. They all laughed at this. They clearly thought it was a joke. I laughed it off too. Part 3 is up. My husband confessed to me that he settled for me. Disclaimers are not my story time, I sent me on Instagram. That's when he said in front of everyone that he only married me because he lost his chance with Tori. They all laughed. I mean, even Tori's husband found it funny. When we finally got in the car to head home, I asked him if he actually meant it. He looked at me and he said, yeah, I liked Tori before I liked you, and that the only reason he hooked up with me was because he was mad at Tori. I started to cry uncontrollably. This whole time I never thought he had a thing for Tori. He stops the car and he says, "But I love you," that he had no feelings for Tori anymore. I asked him why he would think that was okay to say out loud. He said he had probably had too many drinks. Yeah, it's the alcohol's fault for sure. When we got home, I asked him again if he really loved me. That's when he explained that the love he has for me is different than the love he had for Tori, and that he was actually infatuated with Tori. That our love was safe love. He said, "Just forget about what I said. It was just a joke. I just wanted to make everyone laugh." That's when I realized that he had made a joke at my cost. And it was all to make Tori laugh. Called Tori the next day and explained everything to her. That's when she confessed that her and Jack had been hooking up in college. That sometimes they would hook up when I was asleep on the couch. That they had even done it on top of the kitchen counter and in my bedroom. I told my husband, and that's when he said that I needed to let it go. That Tori was part of the past. He doesn't even touch me or kiss me. He's always angry and reproaching everything that I did. Thinking about leaving him. We don't have kids yet. What should I do? I'm attracted to my father-in-law and I kind of want to hook up with him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. My husband and I met a little over a year ago. We actually met on vacation and we happened to live in the same city, so we decided to go on a date when we got back. 2 months later, we got engaged. My family was completely against it though. My parents thought it was way too quick for us to get married. But here's the thing, I'm 32 and I was desperate at that point for somebody to just ask me to marry them. And looking back, that was completely wrong of me. My parents were so against it that when they met my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, they told him that we should just date a little bit longer before we even decided to get engaged. But of course, eventually we made the decision on our own and my parents just had to deal with it. By the time we had gotten engaged, I had only met his mom. His dad traveled a lot for work, so he was pretty much never home. So here's a little backstory on my husband. He was born in the same city I was, and his parents had him when they were 14 and 15. They were incredibly young. So his parents were more like his friends. They had so much fun and hung out together. It was always a really good time. We decided to have an engagement party, and that's when I met his dad. And it was infatuation at first sight. Part 2 is I'm attracted to my father-in-law and I kind of want to hook up with him. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. I decided to start flirting with him a little bit more. I kind of wanted to see what he would say. My parents-in-law invited me and my husband over to their house for barbecue. So I decided to wear a thong bikini. My father-in-law was grilling in the backyard and my mother-in-law was inside making a salad. So of course, I took off all my clothes and I pranced around the pool in my thong bikini. I positioned myself perfectly so that my father-in-law had a great view of my ass. I also went up to him and started talking. I would touch his shoulder every now and then. That's when he said, "If I didn't know any better, I would think that you're flirting with me." Then he smiled. I almost died. I laughed with him too. And then my stupid husband came outside. That was 2 days ago. You guys tell me, but in my opinion, it sounded like he was liking it. For the rest of the barbecue, every time I would turn to look at him, he was always looking at me, so I knew it was working. But now I'm like, what's the goal? Do I really want to ruin my relationship with my husband and ruin his parents' relationship? Or do you think we can keep it on the down low? What should I do? Story time about how my husband died and his best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. My husband and I were married for almost a decade. During that time, we had 2 kids. And of course, his passing was completely devastating to our families. And 2 weeks after my husband died, I was still grieving. But his best friend started coming around our house a lot. First, he was very emotional. Him and my husband were best friends for about 7 years. They saw each other almost every day. Not only did they work together, but they also would go to the gym together and pretty much hang out all the time. So I know this guy really, really well. When my husband would invite him over, I never got the feeling that he liked me. I mean, sure, sometimes I caught him staring at me, but I'm beautiful, so I understand. So after my husband passed, he started coming over as in, "I want to take care of you," and we would just kind of cry together. I took this as his way of trying to help my husband, so I just thought he was being really sweet. But exactly 1 month after my husband passed away, he started asking me weird questions. Number 1, do you want to start dating again? Number 2, don't you feel lonely at night? Number 3, you're still so young and beautiful. You need to give yourself a chance with someone else. Mind you, I'm still grieving. To these questions, I would usually say no. Obviously, why would I even be thinking about those things? I didn't put too much mind to the questions, but a few days later, he came over after he had been at a bar. As soon as I opened the door to him, he said, "Can I kiss you?" And then he did without me saying yes. Part 2